Transition is, I think, one of the most important, yet potentially one of the hardest modules to do. People are tired, your participants are tired. They've gone through this change, they've realized some things about themselves. They could be inspired, they could be frustrated. There's just kind of this emotional kind of lull, I think, when all of a sudden we move into transition. And so as we move through these slides, it's really our job to start to say, how are we moving out of this environment? How are we now going to take what we've been inspired to do, challenged to do, taught to do, and move into our lives again? How are we actually going to apply this? Transition obviously sets up like all of the other modules would. You don't have to spend a lot of time going over the 5 interlaced modules. We've seen them, we've experienced them now, but maybe a celebration moment of like, we've made it. Here we are. We started out in one direction and now we've come through this full circle and now we are going into a new direction. And part of that new direction is that we have this burden of knowledge. And I'm sure that you guys, having gone through class, I still experience it. We all experience that now that we know what we know. Thank you. I want to see who took us through that one. I think it was Sean, the learning curve. Like now that we know what we know, it can be frustrating. And so to speak real and have that real tone of voice, sharing those personal stories, sharing that realness of like, this knowledge can be a benefit, but it can also be a burden. And just speak truthfully about it in these first couple of slides, but then start to shift into, we still have the choice. Like we can either be frustrated with those that aren't as equipped and as knowledgeable as we are now, having attended this class, or we can be that message. And so this first section really flows through that, just that truth of, yeah, and this, we now know what we know. Now we have to do something with it. And Gina set us up perfectly to take that inspiration forward into practicing it. And as Lethea said, really it's a choice. We have to choose. And then knowing that we're going to impact people. We're going to impact them. People are going to look at us like, what are you doing? You're like listening to me. You're not speaking. You haven't interrupted me. So some of those expectations of people are going to be very high when we head out from class, because while you went to a communication class, you should be this perfect communicator. And that's why we set people up with the scripts of like, hey, I'm trying some things. I'm going to make my best attempt. So this whole first section is, wow, we did it. What's that really mean for us now? How are we going to move into committing to some change, not changing every last thing, and equipping ourselves for realizing that because we're going to be interacting with others, they're going to respond in a particular way. And then we pause and we take some time with this real world reflection, where we give our participants time through the action plan, which is in their workbook and is set up here for us on slide 14, to really think about, what am I going to do? What can I legitimately expect of myself? And what kind of expectation am I going to have of myself in order to make a significant behavior change? We take this opportunity after they've reflected to really talk about default mode. And we've been going over the material with our current cohort of facilitators, and I had our facilitator down in the Carolinas email me, and she said, explain to me this last bullet on slide 13, that failing to shift our default mode is an absence of a choice. And her perspective was, you're still choosing to not change if you stick with your default mode. So you can kind of go both ways with this slide. Really, there's this opportunity to shift and go into a different direction, but that's going to take some commitment. That's going to take a choice. It's going to be comfortable to stay. And I think Sean said that too, in that uncomfortable awareness when we're consciously skilled. Like now I know what I know. It's uncomfortable to be in that space. So using this slide to just acknowledge this can kind of go back and forth for us. But if we're going to make a choice and do something different, we have this action plan to support you with it. And the action plan is actually a new tool. You likely did not see it in your class. It is in the workbook, and it takes them through an opportunity to take a look at a specific area. So a focus area, whether it's a skill, it could be, I'm going to work on my listening skills, or I'm going to work on being silent. Or it could be a relationship that they want to focus, that they want to take what they've learned and start to focus on a particular relationship, or an environment, work or home and church or where they volunteer. So they take a focus area, a skill, a relationship, or an environment. And having identified that, what is the goal? What is the desired outcome or improvement that they want to achieve in that particular focus area? And so having set that goal, they create some action steps, some very specific behaviors. They should be able to be in tune with that idea. What are some specific behaviors that will help them towards this goal to improve this focus area? And that, like I said, is an action plan that's right in their workbook, but it helps to take this moment and this pause of saying, I've learned all of this stuff. What am I now going to actually do with it? You could ask some people to share. We encourage our participants to share about these first two questions. What did you learn about yourself? And what will you commit to doing differently tomorrow? We've done where everyone shares. It's almost like a commitment kind of experience where we're creating some accountability within our group. And then from that, we talk about it as a journey, that this is a continuous journey. I might master one skill, but I have many more to continue to master, or I might master one skill in one area and not another. That it's really just this process, and that as we continue to commit to making these changes, it's a journey for us, but then this is an easy transition into the continuous learning journey of we still have tools and resources to support you. We've been here with you a lot, but now we're shifting back as facilitators and giving our participants that autonomy. And then this can just, you can kind of pick up the pace in this section. The first section of transition is more that inspiration, that reflection, like what are we going to commit to changing? But then this last section is you can just pick up the pace, and this is informational, where we walk through the continuous learning guide. The continuous learning guide you'll see has the same elements of continuous learning, or the same elements of learning that they heard about in orientation that they've been participating in throughout the entire class. Then you can highlight the different pages in the continuous learning guide that relate to those elements of learning. And then when we talk about connecting with another, it's a great opportunity to obviously transition into sharing with them their learning partners. Oh, Sean, I love that you're about to have a fire drill. That makes me so happy. I love moments like that. Thanks for letting us know. And so then we connect with one another and talk about the learning partners, giving them time to exchange information and create a time that they're going to get together with their learning partner in the near future. Then we have a lot of additional resources that you can just continue to highlight for them on this slide 27, where we can get them engaged with our social media and our podcast. We have webinars, all of the emails that they will receive. So just lots of opportunities to continue to connect and be resourced from the organization, but more in a way to set them up where they're starting to live and embrace the material on their own. The last few slides are always kind of the like check the box slides. We go through just really encouraging them, asking them to fill out the evaluation. This is always a great opportunity to say that we grow from feedback. Much of what they see in the material, the continuous learning guide as an example, the action plan as an example, has come from feedback from our participants. And so their evaluation, their feedback is incredibly valuable to us, and we'd like to emphasize that to them. It's also a great opportunity for us to grow as facilitators, and so I always invite my participants to very specifically give me feedback that they would encourage me to grow with. And moving into the concerns and expectations, just revisiting the concerns and expectations that we did in orientation to just kind of close the loop, to say, you know, we heard you. Have we addressed your concerns? Have we met your expectations? You can go through and check this off as a list. That's because it was generated in orientation, or you could send people back to their groups to discuss and then report out how they feel about the concerns and expectations being met. There's some flexibility in how to do this slide, but I would encourage you not to skip it. We've intentionally asked for their input in an orientation, and we want to acknowledge that their input to us was important. And then always the part that we enjoy, the 2 words in 2 minutes to wrap us up and send us out the door. This is a spot where I always bring the facilitator chairs to be part of the U. So we'll come up and we'll sit in part of the U and just ask people to go around and share their 2 words and give them some time to share anything else. And that is the walk and talk out of transition. Any questions before I move out of these slides on any specific slide? All right. As we look at then the insights that go with it, as always, we've got a teaching arc. Transition is a hard section. You're tired as facilitators as well. So keeping that energy and that engagement going to really inspire our participants to go out and start to make those changes that they're committing to is important. So there's, you know, it's teaching, it's facilitating that reentry with that action plan. It's just straight up teaching the information for continuous learning, and then continuing to facilitate that connection that we have with them, that community that we've built, and wrapping up with those 2 words. Again, upbeat, inspirational, really brings it all together. It's kind of bringing it to that high point, but it's also that transition, that end of moving out of the material and into real life. Using the guide as a teaching resource. You can use the slides, you can use the continuous learning guide for those sections, making sure, again, that we've met their expectations and their concerns. Kind of practice walking through it, feel confident about giving them the information that they need to stay connected. And don't overteach. Like they kind of already know what they know. They've been with us for 3 days. And I like this comment about the don't soft sell, the fixator focus, because this is real life. So don't hesitate to be just really clear, like, this is hard. It's still hard for me. And realizing where is that focus and who can we change? And if we're going to be successful, we focus on the ability to make that choice for our own change. And that is transition. Again, any questions? All right. Thanks, Joya, for letting me know that I'm actually speaking to a group of people, because it gets a little lonely when you guys don't say anything. All right.
I had an interesting question. Why is there not a thank you slide or an end slide, like or something like that?
Huh. I will make a note of that. I think that's a great idea. It's almost like a weird, like, and now we're done.
Yeah, we do the 2 words, and usually the facilitators finish with their 2 words. And it's really up to the facilitators how to wrap that. And we're also close at the end of class. Don't you all find that it's kind of hard to say goodbye? So say, okay, we're through. You can leave now.
Yeah. Hold on. So
This
intentionally
is
creating.
Larry.
Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
I just like to dovetail in. Thanks for that comment, Marcia. The thank you does have to come from the facilitators, and it's a personal thing. For whatever you are personally thankful for from the group, they've probably extended a lot of themselves and shared some stories, and that thank you is a opportunity for you as a facilitator to just be genuine about your appreciation for the new friends you learned to meet. So I think that would be my takeaway from the thank you idea. Sarah, I also wanted to speak to your comment about your physical and physiological state during transition. And just be mindful of that. It's something we can't talk about until you go through it. And just once you felt that feeling of giving yourself fully for 3 days and pouring yourself into other people and listening intently, it is incredibly draining. It's a weird mind heart thing that is extremely rewarding. Nothing better. But man, it is a cost. Yeah. So thank you for speaking to that and kind of alerting us to that situation.
It's really very tempting to just bust through these slides. And you can, like, I won't lie, like there's been times I've had to, like, because of the way time has gone, like, oh my gosh, like, okay, we have 20 minutes to get through transition, go. Not an ideal situation, because if we want participants to take this learning and actually implement it into their lives, we've got to create some space for them to start to make that choice and that actionable plan. And so it is like you're just kind of pulling from that well of like, all right, we've got an hour and we can move through this and have that inspiration and still have that commitment to growth and change. And that celebration, like celebrate, like the 2 words is to celebrate and to continue to create that like, wow, I've been impacted by this. Don't lose sight of that. And I think that's probably why we all remember that section and have that meaning connected to it.
A metaphor we can use, Sarah, is if we're going to land the plane, let's give us some space to do it so it's a good landing.
Yeah.
It's really living what we're teaching too, isn't it? It's giving us a chance to take a breath and be where we are, and both sides recognize that it's going to be challenging out there where folks haven't been in here. So yeah, great.
Well, and when we've been living it as long as we have, it's easy for us to be like, oh yeah, it's great, cool, go forth and do it. We have to remember what it's like to like really start to implement that change and all those realizations that we had during that 3-day class, but also all the realizations we've continued to have and grow. That's what we're asking them to embark on. That's a big ask. And so there's a lot to celebrate and also a lot to encourage and inspire. I love it, clearly. All right.
This is Gary. If I could make one more comment.
Yeah.
I was at another organizational workshop last summer in the month of June, 2 weeks, pretty intensive. And one of the things the organizers asked us to do was take a moment and think of all the people who have allowed us to do this. The time, the sacrifices that they're making, whether they're your family or your work or your friends, people who've made the space in your life. It's a lot of work to be there, but there's also people who are making sacrifices to give us that opportunity. I thought that was a really powerful framing, and it put me in a mind of gratitude coming back as that transition to re-engage with folks on the other side of the workshop. Really nice framing, I thought.
I love that. I just love that.
Me too. Thank you.
Everyone learn from each other. That's a gem.
All right. Well, I know that as we move towards our time together next week. Guys, it's next week. Like, we can't even keep on saying like, oh, when we get to St. Louis, like, we are going to be together next week. That Teachbacks is one of the conversations, and it's a huge portion of our time together next week. And usually where there's a lot of concern and questions. So we want to spend a little bit of time today just talking about our Teachbacks. I can tell you that based on the Teachbacks we have heard on call, I have no concerns about the Teachback process in St. Louis. It will just be more of the same, where we are learning and growing together. The purpose of our Teachbacks in person are going to continue the purpose of what we've been doing on calls, where we can look at those concepts, have that content mastery, practice the skills and behaviors of our facilitation and the skills that we're going to teach you. You will see a progressive feedback process when we do Teachbacks in person in St. Louis, where on the calls we've been very encouraging and all of our feedback has been true and genuine. But we're going to start looking at areas to guide and direct when we get in person, especially as it relates to the skills of the how we do facilitation that we'll teach you throughout the mornings next week. So we're going to apply those best practices and guide and direct as we continue to get incredibly skilled at the content. It'll still be the same process. You'll have your Teachback section. You'll be able to pause, step back, and reflect, and then receive feedback. All of the materials that you need will be there for you. Certainly bring your binder, but the PowerPoint decks will already be loaded up in the rooms that we're going to be using for Teachbacks. So all of the technology that you will need to be successful will be already equipped for you. In our first Teachback, we will pull up the slides for you, but then throughout the rest of the week, we're going to encourage you to go find your slides out of the decks and be ready to teach them. Of course, we are here to support you and walk you through that. We've done specific areas of the content for Teachbacks for a reason. Very often they're the more difficult sections or sections that it is easy to be tripped up with based on participant experience. In the Teachback rooms themselves, we will create a facilitated environment. So within our rooms there'll be 4 or 5 of you, and there'll be 2 Teachback coaches. We're going to act as participants. So we want this to be as normal and as real as possible for you for that experience. The Teachback feedback step back process, all very familiar with. It's really wonderful to hear all of you provide feedback for yourselves. It makes our jobs really easy when you're already self-reflecting so much and looking at areas that you can grow and improve. You've all highlighted areas of your strengths that we would definitely affirm, but it's just really encouraging to hear like, oh, but I feel like this could have been different. So you're making our feedback job very easy. So thank you for that self-reflection and willing to grow personally.
Sarah,
yes.
Just might mention the senior facilitators who will be in each classroom.
Yep. So as a facilitator, you'll be doing your Teachback. This is what will happen Monday through Thursday. You'll practice, you'll demonstrate the skills. Then there are 2 coaches, 2 people in the classroom. One of them is a senior facilitator that is developing in their skills in credentialing. When we go into our credentialing process, the class of your first full 3-day class that you'll teach. And so they are there to, again, act as a participant, be supportive, but they're also learning and growing as well. And then the other facilitators in the classroom, so the rest of you that are in your Teachback room, will listen, grow, and support your peers and learn from their feedback as well. And then the feedback coaches, much like we've been doing on the calls, will provide feedback. We do have a Teachback form. If I haven't sent it, I will send it on the next email. So you can see what the form will look like that you'll get feedback on. It's just an opportunity to make sure we capture areas to grow in. Marcia, was there more that you wanted to say about the senior facilitators?
I would just say this is their first time back at facilitator training since they took it, for many of them several years ago. So I think they're very excited to meet you. I think they're going to feel very humbled. They already do. They're so thankful to get to be there. And your teach back coaches, people like Sarah and Larry, will determine whether or not those folks will be giving feedback to you as well. It's always good to get another voice, and you'll just get to meet some more OCL folks. So hopefully it'll be a wonderful, I know it will be a wonderful experience for everyone. We will introduce each other Monday morning, so you'll get to meet them before we get to teachbacks. Thanks, Sarah.
So again, the feedback that you've been receiving, we're going to point out the amazing skills and behaviors, offer that encouragement, coach in areas to grow, very specifically address content errors. This is not out of like pass fail or punitive. We really want to make sure that we all are getting the content right, I guess, and specific areas of the content that can be real tricky, like the disruptive dilemma and reflective listening and the power of the past and effective confrontation. So all of our teach back experiences is an opportunity for all of us to learn. And any guidance and coaching that we would give to any one facilitator is for all facilitators. We're really just creating a teaching, learning environment. It's practice. There's no better way to say it. It's just as much opportunity to practice, and we'll create that supportive environment, but that realistic environment then with the coaching and the direction to go with it. This is a glance at the teach back form. I was going to point, you guys can't see me point. Over here will be all of the things. Can you imagine? Look at this list. All of the stuff that we're going to be teaching you during facilitator training and growing together. And so we'll be looking for certain things in the different teach backs. And then this is where we can provide feedback. We can note on specific slides, and then of course an opportunity for a recognition statement. I'll send a copy of the form on our next email so you can take a look at it, be comfortable with it. Always that pause to reflect and self-reflect. I think my self-reflection is probably where I grow the most. And then when I start to invite the reflection of those that know me well, is when I grow as well. Okay. Any questions about the teach back process? All right. We've sent the teach back assignments previously. I got to move my little guy so I can see what I'm talking about. If you have any questions about the specific teach back assignments, please let us know. When we look at this Wednesday, this is an opportunity. We're going to be learning storytelling, how to tell a story, the value of telling a story, a way to tell a story so that it sticks. And so we're asking you to come up with a section of the slides where you want to share your story. So the reason there aren't any slide assignments for Wednesday is you have to pick your own slide assignment. So if you haven't started to think about that yet, be thinking about that as to where you're going to land a story and what section of slides. So those aren't assigned, but all of the rest are assigned. You can see we've got teach back rooms, 4 to 5 candidates, and then teach back coaches together. All of the logistics of where we're going will be guided by Nina. We wouldn't know what we were doing without her. We'll have all of the material that we need there, and she'll make sure we get where we need to go when we need to be there. Anything rising up for anyone? On like, what zone are we in? Panicked?
Sarah, I just sent, it's Joya. I just sent a question. So when you're talking about doing the storytelling, do we pick one slide? Do we pick several slides? What's the expectation?
It depends on how long your story is, and it depends on how you want to weave that story. I would at least, like, if you know there's one slide you're going to land the story on, I would pick 2 to 3 slides leading in and at least 1 to 2 leading out. So you're kind of building towards that story, transitioning into it, and then practice transitioning out, because transitioning out of a story is hard. So yeah, put a couple around it.
Thank you. That helps immensely. Thank you.
Yeah. Do my hand motions really help too? Like,
They really do. And you've got about 20 minutes. So your story shouldn't be 20 minutes. So let's be really clear. We don't want, unless, you know, there's a reason, generally speaking, your story's not going to be that long. So don't think 20 minutes equals a 20-minute story.
Thank you both. That helps.
Good.
This is Rachel. I have a question though. So would you, so would I be able to pick a slide that was already on, for example, my Monday assignment? There is one particular slide that I feel like I want to put my storytelling in it, or would you recommend choosing it from something else that I have not presented or not assigned to present?
mm-hmm. So two comments that come into my mind. Our Monday slide assignments are learning objectives. And that's usually, I mean, anecdotal stories are great there, but I think when we're thinking about storytelling is when we're really upping the game in our self-disclosure. And I would then encourage shifting to a different section where maybe it's that story where, like, wow, when I realized this was when I was rocked by this class. Find that section of slides when that moment happened for you in class and how you've been applying that then.
Hey, Sarah, just
encourage
you know,
that.
we have 1 minute.
Thanks. And then I would encourage, if you are able, to find a different section, because it just gives you an opportunity to facilitate a different section. I don't think we would tell you, no, you can't. But I think we would encourage you to find as many sections as the slides as possible to facilitate.
100% agree.
Rachel, if you want to run it, Rachel, if you want to call me and run your thoughts by me, I'm happy to walk that through with you.
Yes, thank you.
And I would just add, guys, stretch yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, try something and we'll give you feedback. Think of this as a workshop, especially that day, because we'll talk about things. Is this the best fit for that slide, for that story? It might fit better in another place. Sarah and I and Larry and all the folks know the deck so intimately that we hope we can really help with where that story placement works best. So stretch yourself and be open to feedback, not about good story, bad story, but about where it sits.